I am 26 years old. I'm not 62. I'm not 86. I'm 26. And somehow it feels like I grew up in a completely different America than the one we're living in right now. This isn't some back in my day rant either, you know. I'm not clutching a cane and screaming at clouds or anything, but I swear, man, the world I grew up in feels like it was painted in full color. It was vibrant, dude. It just seems like colors were more profound. And now the one I'm living in just feels like some gray scale, right? A big gray filter over the top of it. You know, remember when kids actually went outside? You know, just were out there playing. Like the whole neighborhood would just sort of materialize, right? Outdoors after school or on the weekends. There were no group chats, there was no notifications or anything. You might have gotten a call on your landline, you know, you got to run to it, still got the cord on it, and maybe you picked that up. But more times than not, it was really just the sound of a basketball outside, right? And then seemingly out of nowhere, like 20 youth would appear. You know what I mean? Myself being one of them. And we would just kind of take over the street, take over the neighborhood, you know, whether you're playing basketball or just riding bikes in hordes, you know what I mean? Going in and out, trying to ride the white line as close as you could, or sticking the old soda can on your back tire, or the what was it called, like a playing card, make it sound like a motorbike, you know, because we were the shit back then, and you can't tell me anything otherwise. You can't tell me otherwise. Or slip and slides. You remember these slip and slides? They were basically backyard amusement parks. You know, who needs to go to a water park when you have a slip and slide and you can risk going over a sharp rock at full speed, you know, slicing up your entire stomach. But who cares? That was just a part of it, right? You risk a concussion sliding across half dead grass, but nobody cared. That's the thing. If you didn't end summer and go back to school with bruises and scrapes all over your body, then you weren't doing it right. You know what I mean? Or VHS tapes, okay? Man, dude, this brings back so many memories. I remember at my grandparents' house, we had an entire, like, we had a room off of the basement that was cold. It was concrete floor. You know, you could say it wasn't finished. It was kind of like a storeroom, but there was just walls and walls, shelves and shelves of nothing but VHS tapes and bags of Beanie Babies from my grandmother. You know what I mean? And it was so crazy. Who remembers they would pop in a VHS tape only to find out that you had forgotten to rewind it the last time you had watched it, because films were so good it was nothing to watch them 10 times, you know, and you had forgotten to rewind it. Even just the 5 minutes it took to sit there and press rewind, you know, it was just such a personal betrayal at the highest level. You know, you're sitting there questioning like your life choices. You know what I mean? But or, you know, speaking of DIY and having to do things yourself, duct tape wallets, dude, I used to make a shit ton of duct tape wallets. I used to sell them for like $1, right? I remember going to Home Depot with my papa and just getting crazy colors, camouflage, orange, you know, just not just your typical gray duct tape, although I did that too. And dude, I used to sell them like hot cakes. I'm telling you, on the school bus in school, to the point where I actually got banned from selling them. They put out a disclaimer or a PSA to the parents, like, you cannot sell things on school property, because I actually inspired a couple other kids to do this. So I was trying to stay one step ahead. I was watching YouTube videos. How do I make a ID card? Dude, we're young as shit. We don't have IDs. You know what I mean? But I'm like, how can I make an ID card? Oh, okay. I'll take a Ziploc bag. I'll cut a little rectangle out of that, and then I'll tape that around the edges on the inside of the duct tape wallet. Oh, what about credit card holders? We didn't have credit cards. We're fucking young, but I have my library card, you know? So obviously I need a credit card slot. You know what I mean? So I was just coming up with these creative ways to make like cool looking duct tape wallets and shit. I wish I still had some of them, you know, but I was making a killing up until I wasn't allowed to sell them. And I would still sell them. Maybe this was my introduction to like my criminal phase, right? Because I wasn't allowed to sell them. So I would discreetly like, Like, hey, dude, you're interested in a duct tape wallet? Like, I got it right here. It's in my bag. Don't let anybody see it. Don't pull it out. Okay, just give me the money. I'll give you the duct tape wallet. Okay, you know what I mean? Like, dude, that was so crazy. You know what I mean? Or back to the VHS film, just the Disney movies and the level and quality of content was just so amazing back then, dude. They weren't these cash grabs. It wasn't the fucking 17th remake or extension or sequel to Fast and the Furious. You know what I mean? They actually meant something. They had messages. You know, they were deep. Some of my favorite, like Brother Bear or Pocahontas, Spirit, you know, they had weight. They actually had soul. They cared about what they were putting out. And dude, I can't even tell you how many times I've seen Brother Bear or Spirit. I mean, these films are iconic. Iconic. If you haven't seen these, especially Spirit, dude, or Brother Bear, I mean, dude, it's just, they don't make cinema of this quality anymore. They actually had soul. And today, Disney just feels like a corporate board meeting, wrote the entire thing, scripted the entire thing, and that's pretty much what it is, you know, just constantly forcing agendas down our throat. I mean, I'm really sick of it. So of course I'm nostalgic for the old days, you know. And don't forget things like drinking out of the water hose. We all did it, dude. Don't act like you didn't. We have all taken a drink out of the water hose, and it meant absolutely nothing at the time, you know, which, looking back, probably not the best decision. We were basically huffing liquid rubber straight to the lungs, but somehow nobody died. I'm still here. You know, that is, we'll see how that goes. But for the time being, nobody got harmed. You know, it was just a carefree time. You know, or you had things like the old school Cartoon Network. I know everybody remembers Dexter's Laboratory. I mean, come on, that was my favorite. Codename Kids Next Door. Remember that, dude? You know, shows like that, they actually felt creative. They felt bizarre. They were weird, but they were smart at the same time. You know what I mean? A mix of education, if you will, but mostly entertainment. They would just weren't afraid to be weird, you know, or quirky, if you will. Not a big fan of that word, but I guess it kind of describes what I'm talking about, you know. And don't even get me started on the original YouTube. I mean, the original YouTube, bro. Like Charlie Bit My Finger.
Charlie, that really hurt.
Or Chin Faces, that kind of thing, like this old school shit, or that weird little dancing alien that had the old like fighter hat on and the goggle. You know what I'm talking? I'm gonna try to find it. I forget what it's called, or like the gummy bear. You know what I mean? Dude, that was the peak of internet comedy. I'm telling you. I don't know what we're doing now, but we're never gonna top what was coming out with Charlie Bit My Finger. We're not gonna outdo that, you know, to this day. And what sucks about, speaking of what's coming out today, it's just everything has a corporate sponsor, dude. Even if you pay YouTube to not show you ads, every other video that I watch is like, oh, and now a word from our sponsor. And it's fucking a minute and a half of just some product I'm never going to use. It's like, dude, I pay to not have ads, and then you put an ad in the video. This shit, I despise this. And that's why here at Wicks the Board, we are, as we start to grow and whatnot, this is, and I'm making it known now, this is all community funded. I'm never going to take a corporate sponsor. I'm never going to insert ads into my videos, dude. I fucking hate ads. Ask the people I know. They are the bane of my existence. I will never do that to you guys, the ones who actually click through and watch all these things, which I always appreciate. I will never do that to you guys. Mark my words. Stamp that right now. You know, I hate that shit. And, you know, so anyway, forget all about that. But back then, it just felt like the world was buzzing. You know what I mean? Like, you'd go outside, the whole neighborhood is outside. There was little league games, there were late night adventures, you know. And little league, back when I played, you know, I've touched a lot of different sports, but you remember t-ball or like underhand coach pitch and shit like that. It wasn't even just baseball, dude. It was a whole experience. It was America in a nutshell. You know what I mean? You always had the one kid that couldn't hit a ball to save his life, but somehow he always got on base, you know, by getting hit with a pitch or something. You know what I mean? It was one of those, like, there was no such thing as striking out. Dude, it was just fun, you know. But then you also had kids coaches or even kids' parents, as I was gonna say, screaming, like it's their favorite athlete. You know what I mean? To run around the bases. They're sneaking like little Bud Lights off on the side. Everybody's got their little dad stance going. The moms are all chit chatting. It's just, dude, everybody was just having a blast in their own way, in the same area. The kids are having fun. The dads are having fun. The moms are having, dude, everybody just got along. You know what I mean? And of course, you can never forget the concession stand, hot dogs and soda after a game, or who remembers like the little baggies of oranges that somebody's mom brought and like insisted on just giving them out. You know what I mean? This was just peak living, dude, and it always was better than a 5-star restaurant. Like, dude, fuck Nobu, fuck Ruth's Chris, I would rather have a hot dog, soda, and the little bag of oranges. You know what I mean? Of course. And speaking of Little League, like where I used to play was Casey Park, back where I'm from, you know what I mean? And these parks, dude, everyone had that spot. You know what I mean? Like the spot you and your friends knew, you'd always go, you'd always gather there. You know what I mean? And for me at Casey Park, there was this one little area where we would all go to cliff jump. And back then, it just felt like we were jumping 50 stories into the lake. Now, obviously, I'm a little bit older. I can realize that it was pretty much like a 12-foot drop. You know what I mean? Like hardly a cliff. But we used to have to walk down the trail, about a quarter of a mile to where we would jump off the cliff, if you will. You know what I mean? And we would jump off into this dark ass lake water. And it was just the funnest thing in the world. And you'd have to climb your way up by this like makeshift ladder of tree roots and branches and getting all muddy. And dude, it's just, we had so much fun, dude. Like nobody cared. You know what I mean? Cliff jumping, it was just half adrenaline, half peer pressure. There was always that one friend that was talking the most shit, and then you get there and they're looking over the edge and they're like, I don't want to do it. We're like, dude, come on, man, don't be gay, don't do that, dude, come on. You were talking the most, you know what I mean? So there was always that one kid, and you would swear that you weren't scared. Then you'd stand on the edge for like 20 minutes, you know what I mean, just contemplating life choices, like, dude, how did I fucking end up here? You know what I mean? But it was just, when it came time that you actually jumped, it was just pure freedom. You know what I mean? It was just being in the air for what felt like 10 minutes. It was probably a second and a half. You know what I mean? But it was just freedom, dude. And I can't think of another way to describe it other than just freedom, And speaking of freedom, I'm sure, like myself, you all remember sneaking out. You know what I mean? That was the ultimate test of friendship back in the day. You know what I mean? Nobody was even sneaking out to do anything important. You weren't running some kind of secret mission or something, not even close. Half the time you were just linking, riding bikes to the gas station, go and get you some Skittles or whatever. Or we used to go to Wegmans, if you're familiar, a grocery store. This was back when they had the aisles of like self-serve candy. You remember you'd have all the candy lined up on the wall. You'd have your Swedish Fish, your Blue Sharks, your little Twizzlers, Circle Rounds, whatever you call them. Those were my personal favorite, Sour Patch Kids, whatever. And I remember we would go through the aisle, get the little bag, and we would self-serve just a scoop of this, a scoop of that. Oh, I want that. Oh, that looks good over there. Never had that. Just stuff in the bag. And then we would go through. Easy. This is probably why they don't do this anymore. We would go through and find out which candy was the cheapest by weight, because you would weigh it yourself. So we would pick that one and say, oh yeah, this bag is all fucking candy corn. You know what I mean? And it's just this concoction of sugar, just everything in a bag. And you'd go and weigh it, and you'd try to like hold on to the top of the bag a little bit, trying to shave off 20 cents because we weren't balling. We didn't work back then. We might have had like $12 between the two of us. You know what I mean? And it would print out the little sticker. We slap it on the bag. We'd go through self-checkout, and we'd be riding our bikes away, in the middle of the night, just feeling like we just hit the craziest lick, just on top of the world. You know what I mean? But it was the act of sneaking out that made it feel legendary. You know what I mean? Every creak of the door, every crunch of gravel, it felt like you were in a heist movie. The way we used to do it at my grandfather's house was I was in a bedroom that had a window that led out over the second garage. So we had two garage doors, one being under the main house, and then the other was just a garage. There was nothing above it. So it had a little like little roof area, but there was a window attached to my room that would allow you to get out onto the roof. So we would plan it in advance, right? Not to raise any alarms. We'd wait to the last second. Well, I'd wait to the last second and go outside just before bedtime, and I would set up a ladder at the back of the roof. But actually, you know what's crazy? Before I even found the ladder, my papa used to chop a lot of wood. We had a wood stove, and he would stack it in the back of this garage area. You know what I mean? So I would pull out, I'm not even joking, I would pull out little individual logs. So crazy to think about this. I would pull out individual logs and I would use them to scale down. Like I'd throw my legs over the side of the roof and use the logs as little steps just to not raise suspicion. You know what I mean? And I'd have to go out around to the shed, grab my bike, like walk it out. And of course, I always kept treats on me because we had dogs. So if they ever came out the doggy door or something, immediately like, yo, Bug, here's a treat. You know, like keep calm, dude. Be a homeboy in this situation. You know what I mean? And once I got down the drive and I actually got up on the bike, took the right, took another right, you know, it felt like you were invincible. It felt like the night was endless. You know what I mean? And it was the kind of freedom where I didn't even care that my best friend, we were 2 miles apart. I think exactly 2.1 miles. And we would meet halfway at this little bridge. So I'm literally riding a whole mile. He's riding a mile. It's pitch black. You know, this is upstate New York. It's kind of country-ish, like kind of not. So there's no lights or anything. You're passing by these huge ass fields, these meadows and stuff. I remember hearing coyotes and stuff. And it's crazy. When I was riding by myself, it's like you think you're not scared, but then you're hauling fucking ass, dude. Like you cannot get there fast enough. And then, of course, when I would link up with my boy, there's safety in numbers. You know what I mean? And I just remember sometimes, dude, we would be shining the light from side to side, and we've actually seen eyes before. They're little coyotes, you know what I mean? But it was just the adrenaline that came with the act of sneaking out, even to do nothing but just go get some candy, ride bikes around, sneak into the park. I sneak in. There was just a flimsy little metal bar, you know, because it was one of those parks like open at dawn, closes at dusk. There was a little bar with a lock on it, just duck under it. And we just go there, sit in this big lifeguard chair that could sit like 6 people side by side, and we just eat candy, talk shit, dude. You know what I mean? Look out at the lake, that kind of thing. And it was just so free. It was a new level of freedom mixed with the adrenaline from the act of sneaking out, you know. Or everybody remembers this ding dong ditching. Come on, man. This was the sport of champions. You are not an athlete if you have not ding dong ditched in your life, okay? You'd pick out the neighbor with the scariest looking porch light. Maybe it's flickering a little bit. Okay, you'd sprint up, bang on the door while somebody else is hitting the doorbell, or you do both. You know what I mean? We all have to take turns. And then you turn around and run like your life depended on it, dude. And in that moment, nothing made you feel more alive than hearing the door like fly open. You know what I'm saying? As you dove into a bush or under a pine tree or something. I remember that happened once where we tried to up the ante and we would see which one of us could we push to hit the same house twice or 3 times in a row. And I just remember one of my friends, Preston, it was his 3rd time hitting this house, and damn near immediately after he like banged on the door, dude, the door flew open. And at the time I was hiding like this under a pine tree. Like I couldn't even get up and run because there were so many branches. I mean, I was just on the ground like this, dude. I've never seen like such a look of fear come over somebody. Dude, he just starts hauling ass. This dude is so mad. He's on the phone. He's like, I'm calling the police. All of my other friends that was with me in the group, they all left. I'm like, what the fuck do I do? Because I'm in his line of sight if I move. So I just remember sitting under the tree until he went inside. I didn't see the police show up, and I eventually, you know, army crawled my way out of that. But dude, it's just stuff like that, man. It was so stupid. It was so dumb. You know what I mean? It was but it was harmless. It was the kind of crime that, every kid is guilty of at least once. You know what I mean? It's just living, it's just a part of life. You know what I mean? But now it's like, dude, you'll never hear a kid talk about that nowadays. Ding dong dish. I'd almost be happy if somebody ding dong dished me, just because, as irritating as it might be to be woken up at 1:30 in the morning or something, it's still like, okay, I was a kid once too. I kind of did this shit. But nowadays, dude, these kids aren't interested in actual fun, man. Fun for them is just doom scrolling. They don't understand real fun, like the kind of fun that came from playing Game Boy. Who remember? Come on, man. I know y'all remember the Game Boy. Stop playing, man. I had a silver one, and remember, if your game cartridge didn't work, big man, just blow on it. You know what I mean? And that fixed it, dude. It really did, man. Tell me how a lung full of hot air was more reliable than today's $600 consoles. You know what I mean? It's just, back then, man, life was just alive. That's the only way I could put it. And unfortunately, you compare that to now, dude, nobody goes outside. I'm serious, man. You could drive through a neighborhood at 2, 3, 4 p.m. on a summer evening. You know what I mean? And dude, it looks like a ghost town. Man, nobody's there. But back then, man, you had at least 12 kids in every yard. Somebody who's dragging a slip and slide across half dead grass or trying to set up a wiffle ball net. I remember playing, I'm a big hockey fan. So I remember playing street hockey, and just constantly having to move the goals out of the street because a car was coming down, but nobody cared, not even the driver. It was always, they never honked. They never like got right up on you and slammed the brakes or anything. They were courteous, they were understanding that this was just kids having fun, and some of them even like waved or, maybe celebratory, honked their horn. And then as soon as they were gone, you'd like sprint back out there, put the goals back, throw the ball back into play, and I don't know, man. Now it's just, you might just hear the faint hum of an air conditioning unit, or maybe a Ring doorbell alert that your Amazon package has arrived. The childhood of 2025 is essentially just one big push notification. That's at least how it seems. And even if people do hang out, it's not even really hanging out anymore. Even the youth, which is surprising, it's just a collection of kids in a room and they're just scrolling, and they'll send each other videos that they find on their phone that they could have just sent in a group chat or something. So what's even the point of just hanging out together? Fun today has been reduced to scrolling in silence, laughing at content you didn't make with people you're not even paying attention to, even though you're sharing the room, until somebody gets hungry and maybe you heat up some pizza rolls or something. I don't know. But I just feel like people don't know how to enjoy themselves anymore without a screen mediating their entire experience. You take someone's phone away and they act like you just cut off their oxygen supply. A lot of these kids, man, that's the vibe that I get from them. And I get it, we're all addicted to an extent. But it's sad that kids don't even know the feeling of just being bored. Boredom used to lead to creativity, and now boredom just leads to panic or anxiety. Listen to the kids today talk about anxiety. Our summers used to be so long. By the end of it, it's like we couldn't wait to get back to school. And now they don't care whether they're in school or off, because the whole time, no matter where they're at, they're just scrolling. It doesn't even matter. So, I just think let kids be kids. I don't care what you identify as you're older and stuff like that. Personally, we all have our opinions and things, but live however you want. I'm nobody to stop anybody else, but I'm also really tired of just the politics and agendas that are being dumped on us or forced into the modern Saturday morning cartoons and kindergarten classrooms and shit. 6-year-olds don't need to be learning about gender theory and all this stuff, okay? They're still trying to figure out why glue tastes weird and Play-Doh isn't edible, and they're just becoming conscious. They don't need this progressive like shit shoved down their throats, man. It's just creepy. It's really creepy. And speaking of, you know, another thing that's affected modern life, modern youth is just the government's corruption. It's not even subtle anymore. It's just blatant for the world to see. It's in our faces. We catch them in a lie and then they lie to cover the lie. And it's just like, like, do you think I'm an idiot? Like, we don't accept this, but it is what it is. They used to at least pretend to be on your side, shake a few hands, kiss a few babies. You know what I mean? But now they look you dead in the eye and say, yeah, we stole from you. Yeah, 100%. What are you going to do about it? We're the government. Also, don't forget to pay your taxes because the second that you do, you're going to prison. Even though, like, all of you collectively should be in prison for what you're stealing from me, let you not pay Uncle Sam one time and that's your ass. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different factors that play into the whole life isn't what it used to be. The quality of life is tanking. Wages are stagnant, rent through the roof. Grocery feels like luxury items at this point. You go to the store for just a few things and you walk out wondering, did I just take out a personal loan? Did I just finance a fucking car? You know what I mean? I've got 5 things in the basket and somehow it's an absorbent amount of money. You know what I mean? But at least Netflix raised your subscription again. Don't even get me started on these subscriptions. I canceled all but like one of them. I just can't do it anymore. Because entertainment as a whole now, dude, it's just trash. It's utter garbage. Hollywood went from art to a recycle bin, essentially. Movies used to feel like events. It was a whole thing going to the movie theater, getting your buttery ass, like cancer causing popcorn, getting a big thing of Twizzlers, It was a whole thing. It was a whole experience. And now it just feels like another superhero origin story, or fucking Fast and the Furious 27, whatever fucking number we're on now. Vin Diesel is going to be drag racing spaceships in the next one if we keep going down this path. You can only drive cars through so many fucking skyscrapers and over tanks. And like, dude, I don't even know what it is anymore. It used to be cool, like Tokyo Drift, when it was actually racing and there was a story behind it. It was okay. Even as, I'm not a car guy myself, but now it's like, dude, what are you even doing? Like, you're taking down whole governments, fucking doing flips over helicopters. Like, what are we doing? I mean, it's just not cool anymore, man. It's not, it's like the creative spirit that made our childhood so alive got vacuumed out of the culture, Everything just feels so processed, manufactured, so artificial, even music, movies, even food, dude. Obviously, I don't have to tell you how processed that shit ever is. You ever notice how strawberries don't even taste like strawberries anymore? Think back when you were a kid. I remember going and picking fresh strawberries and just, dude, just how like magical that was. Now it's just fruit flavored fruit. You know what I mean? It's not even fruit. It's fruit flavored fruit. That's America right now. Just the fruit flavored version of what it used to be, essentially. Like that old yellow gum that would taste like shit after 7 seconds. You know what I mean? What I'm talking. I'm gonna see if I can find it and throw it up here. I know you know what I'm talking about. Juicy fruit. There it is. Juicy fruit. Yeah. That's America. America juicy fruit. That's what it is. And the thing is, like, it's not just adulthood making it feel this way. I'm not just complaining because I'm jaded and I'm older and I have bills. That's an easy excuse. People love to dismiss it. Well, of course you're jaded now. You've got bills. You're older. Like, you are responsible. You know what I mean? But that's not what I'm saying, because even if you were to ask an adult back then, life was objectively better. That's what I'm saying. Ask anyone who was around in the 90s or the early 2000s. Less surveillance, less division, less noise. People actually lived. People weren't at each other's throats. I asked, like my parents and people their age, and it felt like, if you want to get into the whole race thing, not to make it about that, but it felt like in the 90s, like people were just past that. You know what I mean? It almost wasn't even a thing anymore. That's how it's relayed to me. But now all of a sudden it's at the forefront of all of this divisive rhetoric. It's like, how did we regress? In the 90s, we didn't care. And now it's like people can't identify themselves as anything but what they look like. It's just a shame, And back then, people weren't glued to their feeds, fucking doom scrolling bad news and political fights, or seeing tragedies nobody should have to witness with their own eyes, just it wasn't like that. They were outside, they were talking, they were laughing, they were grilling, cooler full of Pepsis and Coca-Colas and fucking Yingling or something, you know what I mean? Just having a blast, man. Everybody's laughing, everybody's having a good time. They were just living. They were living, And I really think we, like Gen Z, are just the last generation that got to taste it before it collapsed. We caught the tail end of the good times. And I'm not talking about the prosperity of like the 50s, just really the good times, man. Like back in the day will, I think, always be the late 90s, early 2000s. That's back in the day to me, which was a Wednesday, by the way. Um, and that was a Dane Cook reference if you're familiar. But, you know, it just feels like almost overnight we just woke up in this dull, in this gray scape, if you will, this digital wasteland where everything is so performative, so hollow, just from relationships and people's lives. And we all know social media is fake, and yet everybody compares themselves to it. It's, what I mean? Just trying to hit this impossible standard that is, in my opinion, just causing people to not live anymore. They don't know how, and no matter how hard you try to recreate that happiness, the bikes, the hose water, blockbuster nights, come on, man. Like you can't. You can't, because the world itself has changed. And it's not nostalgia goggles, it's the fact that the foundation underneath us has been ripped up and replaced with something cheaper, uglier, and just all around emptier, and it sucks, dude. It sucks because when you think back, like things really were great. And then when you kind of snap to today, it's like, damn, dude, like what happened? What happened, man? You don't even know your neighbors. Nobody's outside anymore. Kids aren't getting scraped up on the pavement like they should. Everybody's being coddled or getting Vyvanse at the age of 9. And just, everybody's just in this weird state. When you look around, you see it on their faces. People are ready to snap or just implode for whatever reason. And I wish it wasn't the case, man. So, yeah, I'm 26, and somehow I already sound like an old man ranting about the good old days. You know what I mean? Which is funny because I shouldn't even have good old days yet, dude. I'm 26, but here we are. Such is the state of the world. But I don't know, man. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you relate. Let me know some of the stories that you remember, give me an insight to what's nostalgic for you. If you made it this far, I really do appreciate you. I think we're edging on 70 subscribers. Pause. Really do appreciate everybody that tunes in, that hits that like, hits that subscribe button, leaves a comment. I always try to get to them. You know what I mean? So again, I really appreciate it. This is only the beginning, man. And of course, as always, it's your boy, Wicks of the Board. Y'all take it easy.